Alright guys, happy Thursday, I believe is when you are watching this video. This is going to be Sophia video 14.4. We kind of goofed up our numbers along the way. So go ahead and make sure you have out this notes. It should have a front side that looks like this and a back side that looks almost identical but says Google Doc Workspace. So go ahead and get that out for me. Alright, so this video is going to play off on Ms. Sorrell's as well as introduce some new concepts, and depending on how well you understand this one will really show or depend on how well you do on Mr. Nelson's video tomorrow night. So let's start with our question. First of all, it says Derek's favorite game at the fair is basketball. He wants to bring enough money to play the game several times. Each game costs $2.50 to play. So this one question is going to actually be a part of our entire page here. So it's going to help fill in this box, which will help fill in this box, which will help fill in this box, and so on. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, now one thing I want to say is that we're going to start with this first box and move on to all of them, but you don't always have to necessarily start with this first box. Depending on the question, you may like a different area to start from, but as I said, they all make the same type of answers, just written different ways. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind as we're working on it. Figure out which ones work best for you and which ones you think are a little bit more difficult, and that way you can help each other out by doing the easier ones first. Okay, so for this first box, when it says write a short verbal description of the mathematics and the word problem, it really just wants you to describe what an equation would be for that. It really wants you to tell me in words what you're trying to do, or if you were going to write out your equation in words, what would it look like? So for instance, on this one, we know that Derek wants to go to the fair and play basketball, and so we know that the total amount of money that he's going to spend is going to be equal to $2.50 times the number of games he plays. So all I did there was I basically made my equation, but I used words instead just to look at it a little bit differently. So again, if I take 250 and multiply it by the number of games that he plays, it's going to equal out his total amount of money that he spends. Alright, go ahead and pause the video, make sure you've got this part copied down. Alright, so for this next part, we are moving on to the second box, which says define your variables, write an equation to show the relationship between x and y. Now, in Mrs. Sorrell's video, she explained to you guys what independent and dependent variables were. The independent variable is the one that stands alone. This is also going to be our x. So for this particular problem, the one that stands alone, or that could be supported by itself, is going to be the number of games played. So that means he can play the amount of games that he wants and it won't change anything. So our dependent variable is going to be the total cost. Now if you think about it, depending on the number of games that he plays, it is dependent on that will determine how much he plays. So if he plays 2 games, you'll get this price. If he plays 5 games, you get a different price. If he plays 10 games, you get a totally different price. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my verbal description from over here and I'm going to turn it into an actual equation. So, y is my total cost, which is my total money spent. Y is equal to $2.50 times x, the number of games played. So I'm going to say y is equal to $2.50 times x, and that would be my equation. Now, as I've told my class, and I'm sure Mr. Nelson and Mrs. Sorrells have told you this as well, whenever we do not have an operation symbol, we are multiplying. So does the equation show an additive relationship or a multiplicative relationship? The answer is going to be multiplicative. Alright, go ahead and pause the video and make sure you've got box number 2 copied down. Alright, so now we are at the third box, and it is going to be the same question still. Derek's favorite game at the fair is basketball. He wants to bring enough money to play the game several times, and each game costs $2.50 to play. Now, before we get started, I need you to change something in this box, okay? So when we look at it, we've got 1, 2, 5, 10, and 20. We want to change that to 1, 2, 5, 10 is going to become 7, and 20 is going to become 8. Sorry about that, guys. So go ahead and make that change real quick. Okay, now what we want to do is fill in the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write my equation down here at the bottom. Y is equal to 250x. I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite that just to help myself out. So y is equal to 250x. So what that means is if I take $2.50 and multiply it by my x value, kind of like the activity that we did on Monday, or Wednesday, I'm sorry, I forgot we had those 2 snow days. But if you take it and you multiply your x value by 250, it's going to give you y. So for the first one, 250 times 1 is going to be $2.50. Okay, so I've helped you with the first one. I want you to go ahead and pause the video, solve those last 4 y values. I'm going to do the same, and then you can check your answers with mine here in just a second. I'm just tricking you. You haven't had enough time yet to fill in that table. So go ahead and pause the video again. Make sure you fill in the table completely. And for real, when you unpause it this next time, the answers will be there. Alright, so we take a look. 1 times 250 gives me $2.50. 2 times 250 gives me 5. 5 times 250 gives me $12.50. 7 times 250 gives me $17.50. And finally, 8 times 250 gives me $20. So I filled in that table, which is ultimately going to help me graph these points on my graph here in just a second. Okay, so go ahead and make sure you've got these correct answers filled out. If you got one wrong, please go ahead and try that math again, just to make sure that you're following along and you see exactly what I did there. So go ahead and pause the video and make sure you got the math all correct according to mine. As I'm sure you figured out by now, there's a Google Doc question coming up here in just a second. But before I allow you to do that, I need you to change 3 numbers on this one, okay? Again, my apologies. I made a boo-boo. Change 5 to 3, change 10 to 4, and change the 20 to 6. After you've done that, pause the video and get ready for a Google Doc question. Alright guys, so we're on our last box. Now we're going to take the data that we have in our table and we're going to move it over to our graph and plot it. So again, this is something you guys should be familiar with. We did it on Monday. We worked on it on last Friday. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and try to plot those. I'm going to do the same as I pause the video, and then at the end we can check it to see if we're on the same page or not. So go ahead now, pause the video, and graph those points onto this graph for me. Alright guys, so what I did is I went ahead and I underlined what each point was going to be, and then I went ahead and graphed it on my coordinate plane. So hopefully yours looks a lot like mine. I got A, B, C, D, and E. And our final question says, should the points on the graph be connected? And the answer is yes, because any point that we put on there, as long as we follow this same rule, would fit this straight line. And what that's going to do is that's going to make it a good check to show us if we've done the right math or not. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these. And it's not a perfect straight line, but that's just because I can't draw a perfectly straight line. But it's pretty close. Alright, so I'm going to put the last Google Doc question up here in just a second. One thing I want to mention before I finish the video is that we just did all these different representations for one problem. It doesn't mean that you have to go in order from 1, 2, 3, or 4. It just means that they all go hand in hand together. Alright, don't forget to answer the last question. Please have a wonderful, safe night, and we will see you guys tomorrow.